Roman Reigns and Jon Moxley break character in heartfelt tribute to Hulk Hogan after shocking news. WWE fans were left speechless as Roman Reigns and Jon Moxley did the unthinkable, breaking character live to honor the legendary Hulk Hogan following his tragic passing. In this emotional video, witness two of wrestling's most dominant forces step out of their on-screen personas to pay respect to the man who paved the way for them. From backstage moments to heartfelt words, this tribute showcases just how much Hulk Hogan meant to the wrestling world, even to those who once embodied the new era. What happened inside that WWE ring on that solemn Monday night wasn't scripted. It wasn't part of any storyline. No heel turn, no title match, no betrayal. It was raw, unscripted, and real. As the bell tolled 10 times through the arena, the audience stood in silence, chilled by the weight of what they were witnessing. WWE had lost a legend. Hulk Hogan, the Immortal One, had passed away. And in a moment that defied the very core of wrestling's sacred fourth wall, Roman Reigns and Jon Moxley stood side by side, not as the tribal chief or the purveyor of violence, but as two men paying tribute to a giant whose shadow touched every corner of the wrestling world. The camera panned across the crowd, many with tears in their eyes. Others stood frozen, uncertain of how to process what they were watching. This wasn't part of the show. This was beyond the ring, beyond kayfabe. Roman Reigns, the man who had held WWE in a vice grip of dominance for over 3 years, stood at the top of the stage, his usual cold, imposing glare softened into something vulnerable, almost broken. And next to him was Jon Moxley, formerly Dean Ambrose of The Shield, backstage for the first time in months. No security. No entrance music. No bravado. Just two men, in black attire, eyes glassy, as the image of Hulk Hogan filled the titantrum behind them. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Roman Reigns was never supposed to break character. His image as the head of the table had become gospel in WWE storytelling. But that night, as he clutched the microphone and looked out across the sea of silent fans, there was no arrogance in his tone. No swagger. Just a tremble. A pause. And then, a breath that echoed through the arena like thunder. He looked down, almost ashamed to speak. Then he raised his eyes to the hard camera and said words that no one expected. "This isn't Roman Reigns speaking tonight. This is Joe Anoa'i. And tonight, I lost a hero." The moment was deafening. You could hear a pin drop inside the arena. Because in that single line, he stripped away every layer of performance, every ounce of character, every line he had ever delivered under the bright lights of WWE. This wasn't a promo. It was grief. Backstage, the atmosphere had shifted hours before the show began. When the news broke that Hulk Hogan had passed away at the age of 71 from cardiac arrest, there was disbelief. Not just among fans, but among superstars, staff, crew, everyone. Some refused to believe it. Others simply sat in silence, replaying Hogan's iconic entrance music in their heads, remembering the flex, the red and yellow, the cupped ear that asked generations to cheer louder. But it was Jon Moxley who showed up without announcement. Without cameras. Without fanfare. The man who had walked away from WWE years earlier, choosing freedom over fame, came back on this night because, as he later said to a hushed crowd, some things are bigger than the business. Security had tried to intercept him when he entered the building, but Paul Heyman had waved them off. Moxley didn't need credentials that night. His presence was a tribute in itself. He wasn't scheduled. He didn't rehearse a word. And yet, when he stepped onto the ramp beside Roman Reigns, the reaction was instant. Chants of "thank you" Hogan merged with spontaneous gasps at the sight of the two former Shield brothers standing shoulder to shoulder. They hadn't appeared together in years. Not since the final chapter of the Shield saga. And yet, here they were, united by grief, not glory. Moxley took the microphone next. And there was no trace of the unhinged, chaotic man fans had come to know. No snarls. No rage. Just quiet, fragile words. I remember the first time I met him, he said, pausing as he stared into the camera lens. Hulk Hogan walked into the performance center. I was just some guy trying to make it, trying to figure out if I had what it took. And he looked at me, smiled, and said, "Brother, you look like you're ready to tear the world apart." I never forgot that. He turned to Reigns. The two men locked eyes, and the pain between them was palpable. They weren't two sides of a bitter wrestling rivalry anymore. They were two men standing in mourning, their history a quiet backdrop to the moment. The audience had never seen this side of them before. It was as if the WWE universe itself had paused, its storylines, its rivalries, its grand illusions, all crumbling in reverence to the reality that a titan had fallen. This was not about wins or losses. Not about belts or boos. This was about legacy. About what it meant to grow up with posters of Hulk Hogan on your wall, to imitate his leg drops in your backyard, to believe, even for a second, that you could Hulk up and conquer the world. Roman's voice cracked as he continued. Before I ever stepped into a ring, before I knew what it meant to be a champion, there was Hogan. He made you believe in heroes. He made you believe in the fight. And tonight, we honor that fight. The crowd erupted, not in cheers, but in a slow, respectful clap that spread across the arena like a wave of shared sorrow. Fans held up homemade signs. R.I.P. Hogan, thank you Hulkster, legends never die. Backstage, you could see the tears in the eyes of legends like Shawn Michaels and Booker T. Even Triple H, the man who had built the modern WWE empire, looked visibly shaken. Michael Cole, sitting at the commentary desk, had gone silent, his usual crisp narration replaced by solemn reverence. Then the screen behind Roman and Moxley changed. It flickered to life, not with pyro or special effects, but with a video montage of Hulk Hogan's greatest moments. His debut in Madison Square Garden. The unforgettable body slam on Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3. The promos. The red and yellow. The moments that defined an era. The crowd cheered through tears. Adults who had watched Hogan growing up hugged their children, explaining who this man was and why he mattered. Younger fans, who had only known Hogan through YouTube clips and Hall of Fame speeches, now witnessed firsthand how deep his impact truly ran. And then something happened that no one expected. Roman stepped back, placed his championship belt gently on the ramp, and kneeled. Moxley followed suit. Two of WWE's most dominant forces, kneeling not in defeat, but in reverence. The moment transcended wrestling. It became sacred. Like a prayer written in silence and muscle and memory. When the video ended, Reigns stood again, wiping his face with the back of his wrist. "We fight every week in this ring," he said, "boys steadier now. But we don't fight alone. We stand on the shoulders of giants." Hulk Hogan was one of the biggest. Moxley nodded, gripping the microphone. "And tonight, we don't mourn a man. We honor a warrior. A legend. Our brother." Then, with no music, no announcement, they turned and walked back up the ramp, side by side, leaving the ring as quiet as they found it. No signature poses. No catchphrases. Just silence. But that silence said everything. Behind the curtain, as they reached gorilla position, Roman and Moxley embraced briefly, no words, just a moment of brotherhood. And even though Moxley would disappear back into the shadows, and Roman would eventually don the crown once more, for that single night they were not WWE characters. They were real. They were men. They were fans. And they were mourning. Later that evening, the WWE released an official statement, accompanied by a black and white image of Hulk Hogan posing one last time, with the caption, "Gone, but never forgotten." "Thank you, Hulkster." Social media exploded. Superstars from AEW to NJPW shared their tributes. Legends like The Undertaker, Ric Flair, and Stone Cold posted emotional messages. Fans flooded timelines with memories and fan art. And somewhere in that tidal wave of love and grief was the simple truth that everyone already knew. Wrestling would never be the same. Because no matter how many champions rise, how many eras evolve, how many shows go on, there was only one Hulk Hogan. And that night, two of wrestling's most powerful icons stepped out of their own stories to bow their heads in honor. Roman Reigns and Jon Moxley didn't just break character. They reminded us all why we ever believed in wrestling heroes to begin with. In the hours that followed, the echoes of that night refused to fade. Fans didn't rush to speculate storylines or predict what came next. There was a rare stillness in the air, a universal pause where the entire wrestling community took a breath and acknowledged a loss that reached beyond championships or rivalries. Across the internet, a wave of remembrance began to crest. Hashtags like #ThankYouHogan and #ImmortalLegacy trended worldwide. But something else lingered in the subtext of it all, something deeper than mourning. It was reverence, and perhaps a collective recognition that the age of larger-than-life icons was quietly drawing to a close. Roman Reigns, who had ruled the WWE landscape for years with an iron presence and godlike invincibility, did not appear on any talk shows the next day. There were no promos, no cryptic tweets, no public training sessions posted to his account. Instead, there was silence. A kind of silence that says more than any thunderous promo ever could. Sources backstage revealed that Reigns had requested all media appearances be cancelled for the week. He wanted, in his own words, time to reflect. That wasn't a phrase he used often. The Roman Reigns that fans knew, the cold, calculated tribal chief, was not a man who showed vulnerability. But Joe Anoa'i, the man behind the character, had been shaken. Meanwhile, Jon Moxley disappeared just as quietly as he arrived. He returned to his life, away from WWE cameras, back to AEW, back to his usual grit and glory schedule. But insiders noted that something about him had changed. That night had left a scar. Not the kind you wear on your face, but the kind that stays in your chest long after the spotlight fades. During a backstage AEW segment days later, Moxley was asked off-camera how he was feeling. His response was whispered, not meant for the cameras, "You don't lose men like that and walk away the same." Those who were present in the arena that night say the atmosphere lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling. Arena staff, production crew, even the janitorial teams moved with a sense of quiet reverence. It wasn't just another Monday Night Raw. It was a requiem, and everyone who was part of it understood they had witnessed something sacred. That moment, those 10 seconds of silence before Reigns spoke, the glint in Moxley's eye, the tremble in Roman's voice, it changed the texture of the show itself. This wasn't about selling tickets or building towards SummerSlam. It was about time standing still for a man who once carried the business on his back with the strength of a generation. The decision to allow Moxley to appear on WWE television, even for just one night, had been made at the highest level, and swiftly. It wasn't planned. It wasn't contractual. Paul Levesque, Triple H, approved it in a hushed conversation with WWE's board and a single nod from Stephanie McMahon. In a moment like this, ego had no place. Moxley had called just hours after the news broke and said only one thing: "I need to be there." Not as a star. Not as Dean Ambrose. Just as me. That gesture, simple and unadorned, rippled through the locker room. For younger talent, men and women who had grown up idolizing Hulk Hogan but had never met him, seeing two titans like Moxley and Reigns drop the walls and bear their grief was a revelation. It reminded everyone of why they stepped into the ring in the first place. It reminded them of the torch they were carrying. WWE superstars past and present posted tributes throughout the week. Becky Lynch uploaded a photo of Hogan holding her newborn, taken backstage at WrestleMania 2 years prior, with the caption, "To the man who made us all believe." Edge, now deep into retirement, shared a long handwritten note remembering Hogan's presence backstage at his debut. He said, "I had the look, and that was all I needed to believe I belonged." But no tribute shook fans more than what happened the following Friday night on SmackDown. The arena lights dimmed. The Titantron flared to life with flickers of red and yellow. A silhouette emerged, not from the ramp, but from the audience, walking through the crowd just like the Shield had done years ago. It was Roman Reigns. alone. Dressed not in his tribal chief gear, but in a plain black t-shirt. The audience fell silent as he stepped over the barricade, climbed the stairs, and entered the ring with nothing but a microphone. He stood there for a long time, eyes scanning the crowd, before speaking. "I wasn't supposed to be here tonight," he began, his voice quieter than usual. "But sometimes, the man has to speak. Not the character." He glanced toward the camera, locking eyes with the millions watching at home. "There are a lot of things I could say about Hulk Hogan. About the legacy. About the muscle. About the charisma. But the truth is, he made us feel like gods. And when I needed strength, when I needed a reminder of who I was, I thought of him." The fans clapped gently, unsure if it was right to interrupt. "Hogan wasn't perfect," he continued. "None of us are. But when I looked into the eyes of kids backstage, fans out in the crowd, and I saw them believing, that's when I understood. That belief? That fire? That's what Hogan gave us. And now, it's ours to carry." There were no chants. Just stillness. Just presence. Roman placed the mic on the mat and stepped away. Later, in a rare backstage interview for WWE's YouTube channel, Reigns explained why he chose to speak again. "I'm not a man who breaks character easily," he said, eyes weary. "But sometimes, being real is the strongest thing you can do." Across the wrestling world, commentators and fans alike struggled to find the words for what they had witnessed that week. One respected analyst wrote, "In breaking character, Roman Reigns became more powerful than ever. He reminded us all that behind the superhero is a man. And behind that man is a fan, just like us. And that's what made this tribute unforgettable. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't designed to sell merch or ratings. It was heartbreak. It was legacy. It was Roman Reigns and Jon Moxley standing in the ring and saying the words the world was too stunned to say. Goodbye, Hulk Hogan. Not as characters. Not as wrestlers. But as sons of the business he helped build." In the days following Hulk Hogan's memorial tribute, a ripple effect began to move through the WWE locker room, one that no storyline could manufacture, no script could contain. The emotional gravity of Roman Reigns and Jon Moxley breaking character had pierced the veil between performance and reality, and the aftershock lingered like a presence that refused to be shaken off. Talent meetings grew quieter. Conversations backstage became more introspective. There was a new reverence in the air, as if the entire company had paused to examine its soul. Veterans who had known Hogan personally found themselves flooded with memories, some joyful, others complicated, all deeply human. Younger talent, who had never met the man but revered his legend, began approaching the ring with more purpose, more respect. One unnamed superstar shared in a backstage documentary that after watching Roman and Moxley's tribute, they found themselves rethinking their own motivations. "It's easy to forget why we do this," he said, adjusting his wrist tape. "Sometimes you need to be reminded that this isn't just a show. It's a legacy." And perhaps nowhere was that legacy more palpable than in the locker room where the Shield once prepared for war. A room now mostly used for production staging had, in a quiet moment that week, been unlocked by security for Roman Reigns and Jon Moxley. Alone. No cameras. No PR handlers. Just two men sitting on opposite sides of a bench, the ghost of Dean Ambrose and the rise of the tribal chief colliding in sacred silence. According to a trusted WWE source, neither man spoke for the first 20 minutes. They just sat, breathing in the history that had been written inside those walls. Then Reigns reached into his duffel and pulled out an old, worn armband, the one he used to wear during the Shield's earliest days. He placed it between them, flat on the bench, and said, "He believed in us before we believed in ourselves." Moxley looked down at it, rubbed his hands over his face, and whispered, "I hated the business for a while. But never him." The significance of that moment was lost on no one who heard about it later. Here were two men who had taken very different roads, broken apart by fame, ideology, and ambition, reunited not for a match, not for a payday, but for mourning. And in that mourning, they had somehow rediscovered a fragment of what once bound them together. Later that night, WWE's digital team quietly released a never-before-seen backstage clip, just under 2 minutes long. No fanfare, no announcements. Just raw footage. It showed Hogan walking into a hallway during WrestleMania 30, red and yellow bandana wrapped around his head, approaching 3 unknown rookies, Roman, Moxley, and Rollins, standing in their ring gear before their Shield match. Hogan shook their hands. He slapped Roman on the shoulder. "That's a strong jaw, brother," he joked. He turned to Dean and said, "You look like trouble." And to Rollins, "You got the eyes of a killer." The rookies chuckled nervously. Hogan walked off. The camera lingered on them for just a beat longer. It was nothing and everything all at once. The clip went viral in hours. Comments poured in. The legend saw the future that day. He passed the torch without even knowing it. And now those 3 carry it differently. And yet, the most touching tribute wasn't one that aired on television or was posted online. It was a moment that took place in the shadows of the ring, long after the fans had filed out of the arena and the lights had dimmed. Roman Reigns, still dressed in his ring gear, walked alone to the squared circle one last time that week. The crew had finished breakdown. Cameras were off. Only a few staff remained. He climbed through the ropes, walked to the center of the ring, and sat cross-legged in silence. A single production assistant, still in the arena to inventory equipment, noticed and stayed back, not daring to disturb him. For almost 20 minutes, Roman sat there, unmoving, staring at the ropes in front of him. When he finally stood, he looked up at the rafters and whispered something too soft to hear. The assistant swore it was, "I'll carry it now." No cameras captured it. No tweets followed. But that was Roman Reigns at his most honest, not as a character, not as a champion, but as a man promising to carry the burden of a legacy passed on by a giant. Across the Pacific, news of Hogan's tribute had reached wrestling promotions worldwide. New Jap.